KAISA is one of the most popular ADCs in solo queue as well as competitive play, and for a good reason. ADC is the role where you feel like you have the least impact on the outcome of the game, and KAISA completely flips that narrative. Her ability to dominate the laning phase while also scaling into both a team fighting monster as well as split pusher gives her the ability to dictate the pace of the match the entire time, more so than any other ADC. If you want to learn how to consistently dominate games as her, then stick around, as we'll be covering everything you need to know to immediately begin playing like a KAISA main. Kicking things off with Playstyle, let's make it clear that KAISA is not for ADCs who want to play safe and scale. You need to be aggressive the entire game to make this pick work. Her low range and wave clear is made up for by the fact that she has absurd damage at all stages while also having a ton of engage and self-peeling tools. In teamfights, you should constantly be looking to get into the backline with your ultimate and cause chaos for your opponents. And if you don't think that you trust your team enough to teamfight, then don't be afraid to venture out on your own. Not only do you have an ADC's ability to take towers in a side lane, but you're playing one of the best duelists in the game. You cannot have an ADC mindset to play KAISA to her full potential. She's very self-reliant, and you should be taking advantage of that whenever possible. Knowing exactly when you should be turning that aggression up will be the key to your success though. There are two main power spikes that will drastically change how you play, and these are of course based on her evolutions. The evolution every KAISA player rushes first is for her Q. This spike changes two things about how you'll play the game. First, your wave clear becomes much faster. Before Q evolve, KAISA tends to struggle clearing minions, but once she has it, she can clear them significantly faster, which enables her to move around the map more quickly and push objectives faster. Of course, the actual spike comes from the fact that you absolutely shred anyone who comes into contact with your missiles. We'll be covering tips on how to maximize the damage that you deal with this ability, so stay tuned. Your second big spike comes from your E evolution. This is what makes KAISA so terrifying to deal with. Her ability to constantly reposition around her opponents with both her ultimate and invisibility is what makes her capable of such aggressive plays. Once you have this evolution, you should definitely find yourself frontlining or deep diving into the enemy lines more often. Alright, moving on to combos. KAISA really has only one true combo that you need to learn, which is her W flash. This combo is mostly reserved for catching your opponents off guard. As we will get into soon, proccing your passive as KAISA is an incredibly important part of your damage rotation. Generally, you'll need to land your W to make sure that you can get the 5 plasma stacks required to actually proc your passive. That's where W flash comes in. By the time your opponent sees the animation, you'll already be so close to them that it will give them 0 time to react, guaranteeing a hit and usually a kill. After that, the most important thing to know about KAISA is how to maximize your damage as efficiently as possible. There's a lot of key things that the best KAISAs in the world do that others don't, which enables them to carry more consistently by scoring more kills. Let's start with the basics. Most players should know that proccing KAISA's passive does a huge burst of damage, but if you haven't read the actual ability, then you may not know that it's also based on your target's missing health, so it works better as an execute. People already do this naturally, but you should be trying to get both your Q and W off before proccing your passive to make sure that you maximize the damage. But what some KAISA players may not instinctively think about is that if you're close to proccing your passive, then you may want to purposefully stop doing damage to allow teammates who have big burst damage incoming to get their abilities off first. Then, after their damage goes off, you proc your passive for a bigger execute burst. That's obviously a bit niche and not something that you'll do often, but definitely something to keep in mind when playing with heavy burst classes. Now let's talk about your Q. First, it's important to understand how the damage from the multiple missiles works. Each missile after the initial one will only do 25% damage on an enemy champion. Technically what this means is that for max damage output, you'd want to be in between as many players as possible. But League of Legends is a game that more often than not rewards focused fire. Dealing less damage but more concentrated damage onto one target is usually the better play. So what you'll generally want to do is hold your Q in fights until your main target is the only thing in range of the auto firing, and then press it for the concentrated burst. As you get better at KAISA as well, you should start to abuse your ultimate's repositioning ability to also accomplish this naturally. You'll generally want to pick a position around the target that you're bursting to jump to where there are no other nearby targets for your Q to lock onto. This way you can also guarantee that all of your damage is concentrated on your main target. That being said, it's not always wrong to Q when it will hit multiple targets. For example, if you're trading early on in the game when minion damage is still very relevant, then Qing your opponent and some dying minions around you is a great way to take less damage during your trade while still dealing decent damage toward your opponent. Next up, let's talk about KAISA's W, and to do that, we need to talk about how her passive's plasma works. Generally, people don't really notice this, but KAISA's auto attacks deal an extra bit of damage based on how many plasma stacks her opponent already has on them. Something players definitely don't think about enough is the fact that the plasma stacks also enhances her W damage. What this means is that you ideally want to initiate your trades or all-ins with your Q and auto attacks and try to keep your W until you have 3 or 4 stacks and end the trade with it to maximize the damage amplification it would get from the stacks. Let's be clear though, this matters a little less during the early stages of the game. Yes, it is still good to do, but you're not going to notice massive damage differences. For example, at level 5, W into 3 autos, the incorrect sequence, does 465 damage, whereas 3 autos into W does 477 damage, which is only a 12 damage difference. You might not think this is worth sparing a thought over, but it's definitely a great habit to build and will definitely add up when paired with the other tips that we're covering. Alright, everything we've gone over so far is about maximizing your damage with KAISA's abilities. Her E and R are no exceptions to this either. You need to always keep in mind that you can't auto attack during your E's animation, and you need to be mindful of that when picking your battles. The initial thing most KAISAs learn is that you should press your E before you're actually going in range of your opponents. That way, once you do reach your auto attack range, your extra attack speed is ready to go and there will be no downtime in your DPS. But you're not always going to start fights that way. Something critical to do is auto canceling your E. All this means is that you auto attack first and after the auto goes off, but before the animation completes, you begin channeling your E. Remember that just like spells, auto attacks technically do have cooldowns. You should make use of the fact that you will have downtime in your DPS. Therefore, it just makes sense to use the ability when you can't even auto attack in the first place. As for your ultimate, many KAISA players may not be aware that your R is an auto attack reset and can technically be used for damage. To use this properly, you'll want to auto, input another auto attack through attack move, and then press R for it to work. Or the easy way of doing this is to enable auto attack under your game settings. That way all you have to do is auto alt and the next auto will go off automatically. Your ult is usually much better served as an engage or self-peeling tool, but if you need that extra bit of oomph in your damage, then this is a good trick to have up your sleeve. All these tips may seem incredibly minor in terms of higher damage output, and yeah, they kind of are. But the thing that KAISA mains understand is that by combining everything together, you can deal significantly more damage than the average player, which will very often catch your opponents off guard. Awesome, now that you know everything about how to maximize your damage, there's just a couple of tips left to know. Great League of Legends players know that this game can usually and often does come down to seconds or even milliseconds. Being able to save any amount of time is something that the best players in the world are always actively seeking new strategies for. This is why KAISA mains figured out ways to bypass her annoying evolution animations. There are a couple of ways, but the easiest and most efficient one is the following. Once you have an evolution from buying items in base, hover your cursor over the evolution. You want to click it and your E at the exact same time, which will make your E's animation cancel your evolution animation. This is a trick that every KAISA main abuses to save valuable time as they're coming out of base to keep their map impact as high as possible. The final tip that we have to make sure you're much more successful on KAISA is to pick her more often than not when you have an engaged support as your partner. Remember that the enemy targets that are CC'd by your allies get a stack of plasma on them. Engaged supports who both enable KAISA to land her burst as well as amplify her damage by giving her extra plasma stacks are the perfect partners for her. It's not that KAISA can't work well with other types of supports, but melee engaged supports will typically perform better overall. Alright, now let's shift over to itemization. We'll keep this section brief simply because we're talking about KAISA. There is probably not a single champion in the game that can match how often her build paths have changed due to her evolution mechanic. By the time you watch this video, her build path may have already been drastically different from the current one, but we may as well cover her current build just in case it isn't. For your first item, rush either Kraken Slayer or Gale Force, depending on what you think you'll need that game. Afterwards, you'll want to build 2 longswords, and this will unlock your Q evolve. Despite how often KAISA builds change, the one thing that remains consistent is players rushing this specific power spike. Then, finish boots, complete your second item, which can be either Phantom Dancer or Wit's End if you need MR, and wrap things up with these items based on what you need in that specific game. Finally, your runes are simple. Hail of Blades will be your keystone of choice, as that allows her to quickly stack up her passive for massive instant burst.
So you might be asking yourself, why go to SkillCapped.com to improve when I could just watch YouTube guides or play the game? Well, let me show you. Let's say you're an AD carry who's struggling to climb the ladder. Not only would you get over 55 site exclusive courses for AD carry, but maybe really what you've been struggling with is wave control in bot lane. Well, we got you covered with 6 different courses breaking down wave control as an AD carry. Not only do we have the largest catalog of guides for League of Legends in the entire world with over 1,500 videos to watch, but these are then curated by the top coaches and players into courses on every skill and topic you need to master in order to truly improve and climb the ladder. If all of this wasn't enough, we haven't even touched on our catalog of over 700 Smurf commentaries, where a challenger expert shows you how to climb out of your rank, and you're guaranteed to get any questions answered by them directly. Not to mention, we're the only service to offer a rank improvement guarantee. If you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped, you can claim a refund, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Head to SkillCapped.com and get the rank you've always wanted. Link in the description below.
Alright everyone, that's everything you need to know to get started dominating as KAISA. Good luck in your games, and we'll see you next time.